Jared Kotler of the Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast joins us on this episode of Run It Back. I'm Noam Watt. My co-host is Jacob Sonic, and the number 20 UConn men's basketball team is rolling, sitting at 14-4 overall, 5-2 in the Big East after a thrashing over Georgetown. And they'll play at DePaul tomorrow night at 6:30. So, Jared, is this the best UConn has looked all season?
Yeah, I really think this is the best we've seen them in some time, too. Going back even a couple of years, it just seems like things have finally started to click for this team. And I know they've been beaten up a little bit on some of these bottom of the Big East teams, but this team needed a stretch to get healthy and really be able to put things together. So, yeah, I think this is the best they've looked in a while, and I'm really excited to see what this next month or so holds for them.
Yeah, so big win against Georgetown. What stood out to you the most from that game? Because everyone was putting the ball in the basket, they're moving the ball up and down the court pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things I think you could point to. I mean, one for me that I think has been big these past couple games, but you saw it especially in Georgetown too, is Isaiah Whaley getting back to being Isaiah Whaley. I mean, anytime you get him cleaning up on the offensive glass, getting those putbacks, that's what they need from him, and playing some good defense. So that was something that was big for me. The development of Andre Jackson over this stretch has also been really, really cool to see. I mean, he really has blossomed into a completely different type of player from what you saw in the non-conference schedule. I mean, he's a playmaker on both sides, and that's been really exciting to see. I mean, this team has also been able to hit threes pretty consistently of late too, which has been an improvement. And I think a lot of that's now that Adama Sanogo's back, being able to work the ball inside has just opened things up for these guys, and they're getting much cleaner looks. You're seeing Tyler Polley, for instance, get really open threes. Whereas, you look in that stretch when you didn't have Sanogo, and even earlier in the season, a lot of his threes were coming at the end of the shot clock, rush threes, just a lot of the pieces that this team needed, and fans were excited to see and show that they had this depth. It's really starting to pay off now. And I think that's what excited me most about that Georgetown win.
Now, you talk about using the bottom of the conference to sort of beat up on teams, get healthy again. But the bottom of the conference, for example, last night, Butler at home demolishes Creighton. And Creighton was a team who was, half a game behind UConn going into that game. So, yes, you want to beat up on those bottom of the conference teams, but they're not a given. So for UConn to come out and win by, 20 plus at home is big. They had 5 scorers over 13 points. Like you said, Andre Jackson, we talked about this on our last episode. Sondik said that he's good at everything. He's not necessarily great at everything, but he's good at every single thing he does. Let me tell you, that dunk that he threw down early in the game, probably the dunk of the year for UConn so far, I would have to say.
And probably should have gotten an and one on it too.
Yeah, he got whacked. But the UConn shot 42% from 3. It's also their 6th straight game over 75 points. So I was one of the critics of Dan Hurley's offensive teams. I don't necessarily think they always play the most efficient offense, but you make a good point. Without Sanogo, their offense just isn't the same. They don't get the same open looks from 3. And so we're seeing it yield better dividends since Sanogo's been back and since they've been at full strength. Now, turning the page to DePaul tomorrow night, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of DePaul?
Oh, usually they're the bottom feeder here, but for the first time in a while, it seems like DePaul, I don't know if I want to say they're formidable, but they're scrappy. They're not going to be an easy out. I mean, this has trap game written all over it. It's kind of the last of the UConn games here against some of those bottom tiered Big East teams. And I know, as you mentioned, we call them bottom tiered Big East teams, but they're still tough teams, especially when you got to go on the road. No road win is easy in conference play. But this game sets up, it's going to be a Saturday night. I'm not sure what the crowd is going to be like at DePaul. I'm not sure what they draw now. But you've got that game leading up to that stretch where you're going to have Creighton, Villanova, and start playing these, top-tiered Big East teams. So this is a game where I want to see UConn go and take care of business. You saw them do it in that game in the road trip against Butler. Even though they struggled a little bit in the first half, they were able to really put together a strong second half. But I think you want this to really be a business trip where you go in, take care of business, start to finish. I know DePaul might not be as easy of an out as they've been in the past, but again, this one kind of has trap game written all over it.
Yeah. So speaking on that, in terms of like matching up, like man-on-man matchups with DePaul, what are you looking for in terms of like, because Javon Freeman Liberty, he's obviously their guy, but his health is unknown with the groin injury, and they have David Jones, they have Brandon Jones. I might be butchering those names, but they basically have 3 guys in double figures that can beat you on the offensive end. So what do you think UConn's defensive approach should be and keeping them off the scoreboard.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look for UConn to just continue to do what they're doing, they're one of the best defensive teams in the country. So, you're going to get that man-to-man with Dan Hurley style teams here where they're just going to play you tough across the board, and they're not going to make it easy on anyone. I think the presence down low is going to be big again when you've got Sanogo and Whaley. If you've got a Cook out there too, blocking shots, I just think it's going to a team that makes it hard for anyone defensively. And I think that stands the test of time now when you see who the number one team in the country is in Auburn, and with UConn being the only team to beat them. I mean, defense translates. You could take that anywhere, and that's what's going to ultimately be the key factor there for them. So I think if they could continue to just play the defense at the level they played, and even stepping it up a little bit more. I know Dan Hurley was pretty pissed about the threes they gave up against Georgetown and in some of that first half defense there. So if they tighten things up, I mean, he's going to have them fired up. He's starting to turn that Geno corner too, where as good as the team looks, he's finding a couple things here to ream him out on it and take, a 20+ point win and turn it into a couple things to work on. So if they take care of business and just play that tough man-to-man defense, I think it's going to be a good outcome for him.
It'll be interesting to see if Javon Freeman-Liberty plays. Hasn't played in a couple of weeks. He's by far their best player. I mean, almost 22 points per game on 39% from three, adds in 7 boards as well. So like you said, like if you look ahead past DePaul, that game becomes a trap game. But we're going to do just that because after DePaul, UConn starts playing all the teams who are right around them. They play Creighton at home. They go on the road against Villanova. They come back home, play Marquette, then back on the road and face Xavier. All 4 of those teams are packed right in the top 6 of the Big East Conference. So we're going to start talking about the Big East a little. Marquette is climbing quickly. What do you like about Shaka Smart's team, and how much more impressive is UConn's business-like win in Milwaukee from a month ago, considering how they're playing right now after just beating Seton Hall a couple days ago?
Yeah, I was always high on that win at Marquette because, again, winning on the road in college basketball in general is hard. But when you can do it against a decent team, and that's kind of where Marquette was at the time, they were decent. They had some good wins, had some weird losses, but they were, an okay team, middle of the pack team. And now they look like world beaters in the Big East. So, I mean, I think that win there, I think you thought coming back to getting that game, I think that one's at XL, but I think you came back and thought that home game would be pretty easy, but now it looks like they've just taken it up to a whole new level. I mean, Shaka Smart, it seems like has found his mojo again, kind of lost it a little bit at Texas, but he's got them playing really hard. They've got young guys. And it seems like a team that's just playing with house money this year. No one expected them to do anything. So I think when you come in with those types of expectations and you start to see some results go in the positive direction, it's easy to just build some momentum. And it seems like that's what they've been doing, just knocking off teams left and right here. And it's not like they've been just beating up on bottom tier teams either. They've been taking it to the, preseason favorites in the Big East. So it's going to be an interesting game when Marquette does come to town. And you mentioned those teams there, and Creighton, Villanova, Xavier. I mean, it's a big put up or shut up month for UConn here.
So sticking with the Big East, also that one of the Joneses was Johnson. I knew I had it wrong. But sticking with the Big East, sticking with the top of the Big East, a topic that pains me to say it, and we've been trying to write them off all year as lucky and not great. We got to talk about Providence because last night they went on the road, they beat Xavier, and Nate Watson didn't even score. Yeah. So that just proves that it's not just him and company. They're a really good basketball team. So let's talk about them and what it's going to take for UConn when that game hopefully gets rescheduled. What is it going to take for UConn to avenge that stinker of a loss at the XL a month ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone wants to see Sanogo against Nate Watson, and that was the matchup we didn't get to see when it was in Hartford. And when you think about it, as poorly as UConn played for most of that game, it came down to the wire in the last minute and a half or so there. So if UConn, only put together, a stinker of a first half instead of a complete terrible first half, they're right in that game and perhaps win that game. And who knows where things are after that. But I just so want that game to be rescheduled because I think it's just such a good matchup. But the teams just play similar styles in some sense where they're going to try to grind you down on defense and just really make you work for everything. And when you get to see that game and you're missing pieces there, it was Tyrese Martin's first game back. He wasn't completely healthy. You just want to see that game, really at full strength there. And who knows if it doesn't get rescheduled, maybe it's one we see in the Big East tournament at MSG, which I think would be a lot of fun there. But I think you're right. As much as UConn fans haven't been able to stomach calling this Providence team good, I mean, at some point you've got to admit they are what their resume says they are. And I think they're starting to move out of that lucky category, which a lot of people were putting them in, and, just kind of got to admit they're a pretty good team.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about how they play similar styles, both grinded out, tough, deep teams. And that's part of why I think Dan Hurley and Ed Cooley don't get along well, because they're very, very similar types of coach. You go to a Providence game and you'll see Ed Cooley hyping up the crowd the same way that Dan Hurley does. And it's no surprise they don't like each other. And at 17-2, 7-1 in conference play, I have to say it, they're for real. So Jared, thanks for joining us. We've seen some good UConn action in the last few weeks. We've seen Jordan Hawkins come to life a little bit against Georgetown, seen the lineup sort of fall into place, people starting to understand their roles. And like you said at the top, this team's really starting to play their best basketball in a number of years.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the season. I think it's going to be a fun couple months here. You
got it. So I'll be in Chicago actually tomorrow night cheering on UConn on behalf of UConn Nation. So hopefully I'll be one of the 2,000 or 3,000 fans in Wintrust Arena. The last 2 times they hosted ranked opponents on Saturdays there, they didn't have more than 4,000 fans in a 10,000 seat arena. So it's not going to be the most hostile road environment, but UConn has to take care of business before things get really tough in the Big East. For now, for Jacob Sondick and Jared Kotler, I'm Noam Watt. Thanks for tuning in to Run It Back on UCTV Sports.